Something many of us can attest to is that large families can be sometimes a bit chaotic. TV and movies depict it all the time. Think Home Alone or the Brady Bunch. Now bring business to this chaos and you get Succession. It's part of being a family office, and it can be complex, filled with different portfolios, assets, and even personalities. So what can we do to improve family office management? We're going to discuss this right now on UBS Trending. Hi, everyone, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm your host, Anthony Pastore. Thank you for being with us. Please join me in welcoming back to the studio Mark Tepsich, Family Office Design and Governance Strategist here at UBS. Mark, great to have you back in the studio.
Great to be back as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So whenever you hear we're talking about family offices, and this time around, you've kind of pulled a bunch of things together to talk about the various nuances of family offices, from things like complexity to the communication styles. You call it the C's of family office solution sourcing. Talk about this report and some of the things that you found in this most recent Family Office Quarterly that stuck out to you.
Yeah, so let's take a step back, right? So when you're thinking about building a family office or evolving a family office or plugging into a new solution, how are you looking at that, right? Like, how are you trying to say this is a better solution than this solution? It's insourcing versus outsourcing, buying, building, hiring somebody. And so the family office ecosystem over the past probably decade and a half, you had the growth of family offices, but what you actually also had was the industry's response to that, right? So you just couldn't, you're not just hiring somebody to fill a role anymore. There's actually external solutions, right, where you could plug into, right? So think consolidated reporting, you could think accounting infrastructure, bill pay, things like that. And so what that means is you need something, some sort of prism, some sort of filter to evaluate those options. And when we start talking about evaluating those options, there's not just cost, right, which is a C. There is other issues. There's conflicts. There is coordination. So that is really where this came from. It's having a prism and a filter and just an evaluative framework to go through.
Right. Complexity, is a big thing. You have these, complex families, which there are, especially in a family office, you have sort of like, as you described, simple families and then complex families. But within those complex families, you talk about conflict being one of the biggest C's, if you will. And I, kind of jokingly use Succession at the beginning of the show. But anybody who knows that show know that the entire point of that story was talking about the conflicts between all of the family members in the business. So what do we know about sort of the inner workings and the daily kind of life of a family, especially with these types of complexities?
Yeah, so this is another C, right? Conflicts. And so I'm not necessarily talking about, hey, let's have an argument about this.
Right.
Conflicts is really, hey, you're evaluating a solution, okay? And how does that solution, what kind of conflicts do they have, right? So the easiest one is a counterparty conflict, right? You're doing a deal with somebody and you know where they're coming from, right? You can understand their bias, how they align or don't align. And so that's an easy conflict to sort of understand to an extent. The other conflict, which I think is not highlighted enough, is the conflicts within a family office. So you think about employees, right? You think about executives, and I think I talk in there about solution sourcing. You should really search for the best solution based on a bunch of criteria, evaluative criteria. And so if you are the solution, if you as an employee are the solution, it's very hard to be objective about your own solution, right? Is that the best solution? And so what it leads to, I find, is a lot of inertia in family offices. So family offices constantly have to evolve as the world around you evolves, as the family itself evolves, as the family balance sheet evolves. And so this is just another criteria, is a conflict. So just taking a step back, looking at the ideal outcomes and saying, is this the best approach for us? And conflicts is one of those that you have to look at.
Objectivity must be really difficult in a family office situation. I think about just my own family, and we're not a business. We're just people who, happen to be born into the same structure biologically, and there's arguments and disagreements there, and trying to be, sort of stand outside and be objective is a really difficult thing. I imagine it must be a very similar and yet even more of a magnitude when it's part of a family office structure of, as you say, a complex family, multiple generations, multiple families involved. So I can imagine that really does provide a sense of like that challenge that they face when there are disagreements or arguments or things aren't going well.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like anything, right? So you've got the multiple generations, you've got multiple family members, you've got family office staff, executives, and you have to take a step back and say, where is this person coming from? Whether they're a family member, whether they're a family office employee, and the solution that they're providing or the decision that they're making as a family member, what sort of conflicts might they have in that situation, right? And that allows you, when you're building a new solution or plugging into a new solution, how does that impact the approach that you're taking as a family office? I'll give you one example. The investment framework of a family office is probably the easiest one to highlight as a conflict. And what I mean by that is, if you have the internal staff of a family office, right, the investment staff, saying, listen, this is the best portfolio allocation that we should make, this is the manager that we select based on our due diligence criteria, and you go down a year or two down the road and that portfolio, right, did not really turn out how you intended, can that family office be objective in evaluating themselves when they are the solution, right? When they are providing that investment solution. And so it's not just internal staff, right? It's external staff, it's counterparties, it's advisors, it's managers. You just have to look and see, is what they're saying, how is their approach and how is that impacted by any sort of conflicts that they may have.
Yeah, and when you're talking about a complex family, you're talking to like sometimes $1 billion of net worth in their portfolios and the businesses. So what are some issues that, and you can imagine there's different personalities involved in a family, and then there are people who are not in the family who work for the family office. So depending on the size and what your assets are as a family office, it could be hundreds of people. What are some of the issues that you've seen that families have that are causing these kind of complex conflicts between them?
Yeah, I mean, one conflict there is, hey, you've got this sort of, you need to evolve, right? And so how you evolve, right? You might have a decision maker that is in the seat, right? Maybe it's a family member, a senior family member, and then you've got the next generation, just to kind of pick on the generational kind of conflicts that could arise. They don't often always arise. And the next gen saying, listen, we should do it this way, right? And maybe that's switching advisors, maybe that's turning over the portfolio, maybe that's selling the business. And that is one conflict that can exist, which is evolving the family office. So when you're talking about evolving the family office, you're talking about evolving its capabilities and what it has to manage and the approach. And so, again, this is just one way to highlight. You've got the conflicts and where everybody's coming from. Cost is another factor. You've got coordination of family office staff. And so this is really the approach that the family members should take when it comes to their family office and how to think through these different solutions.
Right. Mark, before we get to the end of the conversation, something else, another C that popped up is cost, which is another factor in the way that you've put your report together, talking about upfront costs, initial costs, ongoing costs, onboarding. Why is this so important in the context of this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a practical matter, right, for family offices. You often have to live within a budget. You don't want to, you have a balance sheet that you're working with, so every dollar that's coming off the balance sheet could be, going into the family office budget, right, to an extent. And so you just want to be mindful with the cost budget. And so when you take a step back and say, listen, we don't have to build every single resource in the family office, right? That's how it used to be. The family office ecosystem's really evolved over the last decade plus with the growth of family offices, and that allows you to have much more options. However, with much more options at your fingertips and your disposal as a family office or as a family, that leads to just different factors that you have to look at things through. Cost being one of the more prominent ones. The other one is capability. So can you build within that family office the capability to achieve your desired outcomes, right? Whether it's investing, whether it's tax-related, legal, just having the ability to make an informed decision as a family office and building out that infrastructure. And so cost is a very practical matter for family offices. And it's, to your point, it's not just the initial cost, it's how does that cost change over time? Will there be any decommissioning costs? Will the cost go down? Will it go up like human capital does, or will it go down like tech has a tendency to do? And so with all these options out there in the ecosystem, you just need a framework to look at them, and this is one of the frameworks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to just say to our audience, this is really just scratching the surface on what you wrote about in these several C's of family office solution sourcing. It's a really, really well put together piece, and obviously I would encourage everybody watching who's interested in this topic to get a copy. You can reach out to your financial advisor for that, or you can take a look at that website on your screen, ubs.com/Family Office Quarterly. And as you know, Mark has been my guest in the studio every quarter when there's a new report. So congrats on this one, Mark. Great to have you here. And we'll see you again the next quarter.
Yeah, thank you, Ann.
Great. Yeah, good to see you, Mark.
You too.
And for, again, more information, visit our overall website, ubs.com/views. Lots of great content coming out of different groups within UBS, including our Chief Investment Office. And don't forget, you can follow us on all the social media channels, including Instagram at UBS Trending. There's studios content there. And again, we encourage you to reach out to your financial advisor to continue this conversation. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. And remember to keep your eyes on what's trending. We'll see you soon.